The pale sun over Slaver's Bay bled through a haze of dust and heat, gilding the stones of the Great Pyramid and painting every shadow with gold. A city born of chains and cruelty, Meereen seethed with the murmur of 1,000 voices, all clamoring for hope or vengeance. In its heart, beneath the balustrade of Daenerys' open court, Sir Jorah Mormont waited, alive, whole, and remade. He ran his thumb over the back of his hand, half expecting the skin to prickle or scale over as it once had. Nothing. The curse was gone. His flesh, once twisted and gray, was now pink with fresh blood and new life. His every movement felt miraculous. He had left old Valyria a dying man, a walking corpse with a death sentence etched into his bones. He returned with a touch of fire in his veins, and a secret that haunted his dreams. Fire could cure the stone, as Dragonflame had purged the rot from his body. He remembered the agony of it, the blinding white heat, the stink of his own burning flesh, Daenerys' face shimmering through the pain as she bade Drogon release his flames upon her exiled knight. The others had recoiled in horror, but Daenerys had not turned away. It was as if the gods themselves had decreed that his fate and hers were now entwined. He was not her beloved, nor her kin, nor her son. But she had looked at him, a ruined thing, and seen the kernel of the man he might yet become. In that moment, Sir Jorah had been reborn. Scarred, yes, but scoured clean. Now he stood before her, whole in body, if not in heart. Daenerys' eyes, violet as the dusk above a summer sea, flicked to him, curious, unreadable. "You seem restless, Jorah." He bowed. "Forgive me, Khaleesi. I'm not accustomed to idleness." "Nenda now." She smiled. "That is true. And yet, these are not idle days. You are to command the Unsullied in my name, as you once commanded the Mormont men in the north. Grey Worm is still healing, and my council is not so full of loyal blades as I would like." Jorah's throat tightened. To serve again, to be trusted, was a gift he did not deserve. "Your grace honors me." Her voice dropped, softening. "I also wish to speak of the dragons." He raised his gaze to hers, and something unspoken passed between them. A flicker of dread, or longing, or awe. "They are growing wilder," she confessed. "Viserion and Rhaegal no longer come when I call. Drogon listens only when he wills it. Even my blood cannot bind them as it once did. They crave the sky and the hunt. They fear no man, but neither do they heed me." Jorah's mind flashed to the night of his healing when Drogon's fire had washed over him. He should have died. Instead, he had risen from the ashes. The dragon had spared him, as if recognizing a kinship he did not understand. He recalled the old tales, the half-remembered scraps of Valyrian lore. Dragonfire could shape stone and steel, and dragons bowed only to those they accepted as kin. If the blood of old Valyria still ran the veins of House Targaryen, perhaps something of it lingered in him too, changed by fire, remade in agony. "Let me try, your grace," he said, the words slipping out before he could weigh their presumption. "Let me speak to them. Drogon burned away my curse. Perhaps he left something else behind." Her lips parted, the faintest hint of a smile tracing them. "You would risk your life for me again?" He knelt, head bowed. 1,000 times. She bade him rise. "Then go, Sir Jorah. See if they will listen. But do not forget, dragons are not horses, nor hounds, nor men. They are fire made flesh. If you perish, it will grieve me." He nodded, though his heart thundered. "If I perish, let it be in your service." The dragon pit, beneath the pyramid, was a cavern of shadows and distant thunder. The air shimmered with heat and the rank musk of living flame. Torchlight licked the vaults, illuminating scales that rippled and shifted like molten gold and jade. Viserion and Rhaegal crouched atop a mound of broken bones, their eyes catching the light in liquid pools of topaz and emerald. Drogon, the largest, haunted the far end, his wings mantled over his hoard, eyes closed in the semblance of sleep. Jorah stepped forward, the guards flanking the entrance shifting nervously. He felt their fear. It was sensible, even wise. He himself had once quaked at the sight of Drogon's jaws agape, fangs as long as daggers, fire curling at the corners of his maw. But now, he felt only a strange calm. He belonged here, in this place of monsters and miracles. He unclasped his cloak and let it fall, exposing his arms. No armor, no blade. He was not a threat. He knelt, bowing his head, and began to speak in low, soothing tones. The dragons shifted, their heads snaking toward him. Their nostrils flared, scenting the air. Viserion's forked tongue flicked. Rhaegal let out a curious, guttural sound. "Drogon," Jorah called, his voice barely above a whisper. The black dragon's eyes snapped open, burning crimson in the gloom. For a moment, nothing moved. Jorah held his ground, heart hammering, every nerve ablaze. He remembered the pain, the fire, the stink of his own flesh melting away, the certainty of death. Drogon uncoiled from his heap and approached, slow and predatory. His talons clacked on the stone. Jorah forced himself not to flinch as the dragon's snout loomed before him, hot breath gusting over his face. Scales the size of shields glittered in the torchlight. He lifted his hand, palm up, the way Daenerys had once done. Drogon sniffed, then exhaled a plume of smoke. For a heartbeat, Jorah expected fire, but instead, Drogon nudged his hand, gently, an acknowledgement. Jorah's breath caught. Viserion and Rhaegal watched, their eyes narrowing. "You know me," Jorah murmured. "You remember." Drogon lowered his head, almost bowing. The black dragon's tail lashed, not in anger, but in something like anticipation. Viserion chirped, Rhaegal crooned, and both approached, circling him. Jorah rose slowly. The three dragons regarded him, and in that moment he knew. They did not see a threat. They saw kin, perhaps not Targaryen blood, but something changed, something touched by fire. He turned and strode from the pit, feeling the weight of their gazes upon his back. The news spread quickly through the palace, then through Meereen itself. The pale knight with the healed hands had tamed the dragons, walked among them, left unscathed. The Unsullied began to look at him differently. The freedmen whispered that he was Daenerys' true champion, touched by magic, chosen by the Mother of Dragons herself. Daenerys summoned him to her solar at dusk. She was alone, staring out at the city, the red sky painting her hair with fire. "You have done what no one else could," she said without turning. "Not even I." He bowed, awkward in his humility. "They sense something in me, Khaleesi. I cannot explain it. When Drogon burned away the Greyscale, he left a mark, something they know. They do not fear me, nor do they crave my blood." She turned, her gaze searching. "Could you command them?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I believe I could. If you wish it, I will try." A strange, trembling hope lit her face. "The time is coming, Jorah. I will not stay in Meereen forever. I must reclaim my birthright, cross the narrow sea, take back the Iron Throne. The dragons are my greatest strength, but they must be more than beasts of war. They must be my allies, my weapons, my family. Will you help me?" "Now." He knelt. "There is nothing I desire more." She offered him her hand. He kissed it, feeling the pulse of destiny thrumming between them. In the weeks that followed, Jorah trained with the dragons daily. At first, it was cautious, careful, learning their moods, their hungers, their signs of anger and affection. He found that Drogon would submit to his touch, that Viserion would let him ride astride his neck, that Rhaegal would fly at his command. The Unsullied watched in awe. Even Dario Naharis, swaggering and cocksure, seemed unnerved by Jorah's new authority. Daenerys took counsel with him often. They spoke of tactics, of war, of the future. She would pace the length of her audience chamber, eyes bright with ambition. "We have the ships now, thanks to Yara Greyjoy," she mused one evening. "The armies of Dothraki and Unsullied, but dragons will win Westeros, not men. Jorah nodded. Let them see your power, Khaleesi. Let the lords of the 7 kingdoms tremble at the sight of your dragons. Let them know you are not to be defied. She smiled. And you? Will you fly with me? He looked away. If you ask it. A silence fell, charged with something unspoken. She touched his shoulder. You are more than my knight, Jorah. You are my friend, my guide, my hope. He swallowed, unable to answer. The ache in his chest was sweeter than any wound. The fleet set sail at dawn. Meereen fell away behind them, the city ablaze with banners and song. Daenerys stood at the prow of the lead ship, her hair streaming behind her, dragons circling overhead. Jorah rode with her, armored in black and green, a new cloak clasped at his throat. The sigil of House Mormont, the bear rampant, stitched with golden thread. But at his side, he bore another banner. The 3-headed dragon of Targaryen, a sign of his new allegiance. As the ships carved through the waves, Drogon soared above, his wings blotting out the sun. Viserion and Rhaegal followed, their cries echoing over the sea. Jorah felt the wind in his face, the salt on his lips, the promise of conquest ahead. They made landfall in Dorne, where Alaria Sand and the Sand Snakes welcomed Daenerys with wary hope. The fires of rebellion smoldered across the realm, and the word spread. The Dragon Queen had come, her army at her back, her dragons at her side. Jorah rode forth on Drogon, a figure out of legend, his shadow sweeping over the sands. The Dornish bent the knee. In the storm of banners and oaths, he saw the shape of things to come. A kingdom shattered, but yearning for unity. The first battle was at Storm's End. The Lannister host, commanded by Jaime himself, held the castle in the name of Cersei. They had siege engines, crossbows, the finest knights in Westeros. But they had never faced dragons. Daenerys led the charge, riding Drogon in a blaze of glory. Jorah followed on Viserion, feeling the surge of power as the dragon leapt into the sky, wings driving him higher than he had ever dreamed. Rhaegal swept over the walls, his flames washing over the battlements. Jorah exulted in the flight, the wind tearing at his hair, the roar of battle below. He saw the Lannisters scatter, saw knights melt like wax beneath the fire. The castle gates buckled, red hot, and the defenders broke. He guided Viserion in a sweeping arc, flames pouring from the dragon's jaws. He saw Jaime on the walls, his golden hand gleaming as he rallied his men. Daenerys landed Drogon atop the highest tower, her banner unfurling. The castle surrendered before sunset. After the battle, Jorah dismounted, trembling with adrenaline. Daenerys found him, her face alight with triumph. "You did it," she breathed. "You truly command them." He nodded, still dazed. "It is not command, Khaleesi. It is trust. They know me. They know I would die for you." She smiled, a fierceness in her eyes. "You are my sword, Jorah, my shield, my dragon." The campaign swept northward. Every lord who dared to resist found their walls battered and their armies broken by dragonfire. Some bent the knee, others died. The realm remembered the old days, when dragons ruled from King's Landing to the Wall. Cersei Lannister dug in at the capital, her banners defiant. She sent envoys, threats, promises, lies. Daenerys ignored them all. The siege of King's Landing was swift and brutal. Jorah led the aerial assault, weaving between the spires, flames spilling down the streets. The gold cloaks broke, the people hid or fled. The Red Keep shuddered under the onslaught. Jorah landed atop the battlements, Viserion hissing at the guards. He smashed the gates, letting the Unsullied pour in. Daenerys met him in the throne room, where Cersei knelt, defeated and silent. The queen's eyes blazed with hatred. "It's over," Daenerys said, her voice as cold as winter. "The realm is mine." Cersei spat. "You are nothing but a butcher's daughter with monsters at your back." Daenerys smiled. "These monsters are my family, and they are the future." Jorah watched as the city bowed to its new queen. He had seen horror and wonder, love and loss. He had been cursed and healed. cast out and redeemed. He had flown with dragons, touched the fire, and lived. He knelt at Daenerys' feet as she claimed the Iron Throne, his heart full at last, not with longing or regret, but with the peace of belonging. The dragons roared above the city, fire and shadow in the dying light. And Sir Jorah Mormont, last of Bear Island, first of the Dragon Knights, knew that his story was only beginning. Moini, Shiwa. The shadow of Drogon stretched long across the broken marble of the throne room, crawling up the walls as the sun dipped low beyond the scorched rooftops of King's Landing. Daenerys sat the Iron Throne, the ancient seat seeming to mold itself to her slender frame, as if it had been forged anew for her alone. Below, the conquered city was still, smoke curling from shattered windows, and the cries of the wounded echoing through the Red Keep's halls. Sir Jorah Mormont, his armor stained with the soot and blood of victory, stood at her right hand, her constant, her confidant, her dragon lord. In the days following the fall, the city recoiled like a wounded beast. The small folk hid behind bolted doors, uncertain if the new queen's justice would differ from the last. The gold cloaks, leaderless, surrendered their swords in droves. Daenerys took counsel only with those she trusted, and Jorah became her shadow, attending every council, guarding every moment when her resolve threatened to waver. Yet victory brought no peace to Jorah. In the quiet of the evenings, as Daenerys slept with her dragons curled around the battered towers, he paced the walls above the Blackwater rush. Each step took him farther from the memory of the man he had once been, the exile, the traitor, the doomed son of Bear Island. Now when he gazed into the dragon's eyes, he saw not just the reflection of fire and conquest, but the memory of his own rebirth. Fire had remade him, just as it had given birth to the creatures who now soared above the city. It was a bond he could not name, one that haunted his dreams and filled his waking hours with a strange, restless hunger. One evening, as the city cooled beneath a violet sky, Daenerys summoned him to her solar. Her hair glimmered silver in the dying light. Her eyes dark with secrets. "They fear me, Jorah." She said, her voice raw, her fingers tracing the arms of the throne. Not just the lords and their sons, but the small folk too. Even those who cheered when the bells rang now watched the sky, waiting for fire. "Ain?" He regarded her quietly, knowing there were no simple words to comfort a conqueror. They have never known a queen with dragons. Their fear will pass in time. "Will it?" She countered. Aegon won his throne with fire and blood, but he tempered it with mercy. "My mercy is all that holds this city together." And yet, the dragons, they answer to you as much as to me, Jorah. What have you become? He hesitated, weighing the truth. "A thing remade, Khaleesi. When Drogon's fire purged the Greyscale from my body, it left something behind. I do not know what. Sometimes I feel as though I can hear their thoughts, see through their eyes. At times the fire inside me feels more dragon than man." She regarded him with awe and a touch of fear. "You are more loyal than any brother. My other dragon, my knight, why?" Jorah dropped his gaze, humbled by the trust in her words. "I am whatever you need me to be." A knock at the door broke the silence. Grey Worm entered, his face impassive, but his eyes wary. "Your Grace." "The council is assembled. Lords from the Reach and the Stormlands demand audience." Daenerys stood, her presence filling the chamber. "Let them wait. The realm will bend or break as it must." She glanced at Jorah. "Come. I want you beside me." Together they strode down the corridor, their footsteps echoing in the shattered grandeur of the Red Keep. The hall was crowded with petitioners, survivors, and the cowed lords of Westeros. The banners of the dragon and the bear now hung side by side, crimson and green, casting flickering shadows across the stone. Lord Tarly stood at the head of the nobles, his lips pressed in a thin line. "Your Grace," he said, "the realm begs for mercy. We are yours by right of conquest. But the city bleeds. The small folk starve. We ask for your justice, not your fire." Daenerys listened, her expression cold, but Jorah saw the hurt behind her eyes. She remembered every promise she had made, to break the wheel, to free the people, to end the cycle of fear. She nodded to Jorah. "Speak for me." He stepped forward, the weight of every watching eye upon him. "The Queen's justice will be swift, but it will not be cruel. The days of terror are over. If you serve loyally, you will find peace and reward. If you betray her, the fire you fear will consume you." Then so. A murmur swept through the hall. Some hope, some fear, all uncertainty. Daenerys dismissed them with a wave, her attention turning inward. That night, as the city slept fitfully, Jorah found himself called to the dragon pit. Drogon waited for him, scales glimmering in the torchlight, eyes vast and deep as the void. Viserion and Rhaegal prowled at the edges, their gazes fixed on him. He knelt before Drogon, placing his palm on the beast's snout. A jolt of warmth flooded his body, a communion deeper than any he had known with man or woman. He felt memories not his own. The wind-swept crags of Valyria, the warmth of the egg, the blood of the first hunt. In that moment, he knew himself as both man and dragon, a bridge between two worlds. "Will you fly with me?" he whispered. Drogon's wings flared, a roar shaking the foundations of the city. Without thought, Jorah mounted, feeling the dragon's muscles ripple beneath him. Together they soared into the night, the world shrinking below, the city a patchwork of lights and shadow. Above the clouds, the air was pure and wild. The moon cast silver across Drogon's wings, the stars close enough to touch. Jorah let out a cry, half man, half beast, exulting in the freedom and power. He could feel Drogon's joy, his hunger for the wind, the thrill of flight, the primal music of fire. When they returned, Daenerys waited on the balcony, her hair streaming like a comet's tail. She looked at Jorah not as a subject, nor as a knight, but as an equal. Something unspoken passed between them, a new understanding. The weeks rolled by, each day a test of fire and will. Daenerys' enemies circled, emboldened by rumors that the Dragon Queen was growing merciful. In the Riverlands, the remnants of Lannister and Frey banners rose in rebellion. In the north, Sansa Stark declared the independence of Winterfell. Across the narrow sea, old slavers plotted revenge, hiring faceless men and sellswords. Jorah became her general, leading dragon and man alike in battles that shook the land. He devised new tactics, using the dragons not as blunt instruments, but as living siege engines, precision and terror in equal measure. Viserion, swift and deadly, struck at night, torching enemy camps. Rhaegal swept the fields, breaking cavalry charges before they began. Drogon, under Jorah's command, became a shadow of death, his roars heralding victory or annihilation. But every victory carried a cost. The dragons, unbound, grew more willful. Their hunger for flight, for fire, for freedom gnawed at them. Some nights Jorah awoke in terror, his dreams filled with flame and ash, a vision of dragons turning against their keepers, of cities in ruins, and the sky ablaze. He confided his fears to Daenerys as they walked the ramparts in the blue dawn. "They are not weapons, Khaleesi. They are not tools. They are power incarnate. I can guide them for now, but their true loyalty is to themselves and to you as their mother. Even I am not immune to their wildness." She touched his face, fingers tracing the scars left by fire. "You are changed, Jorah. But you are still mine. If I must choose between ruling with fear and ruling with hope, I choose hope. If the dragons must go, so be it." He shook his head. "You cannot give up your birthright. Not now, not ever." Then, as the war for the realm ground on, enemies struck from the shadows. Assassins crept through the city. Sellswords tried to poison the dragons. In the midst of the chaos, Tyrion Lannister returned, bringing news of a new threat. Euron Greyjoy, king of the Iron Islands, sailing with a fleet of black ships. He means to take you, Daenerys, Tyrion warned. He means to take your dragons. His fleet cannot stand against dragonfire, but the city is weak. If he strikes now, he may end your reign before it has truly begun. Daenerys looked to Jorah. We ride at dawn. The battle for the Blackwater was like none before it. Jorah led the charge, soaring on Drogon above the churning sea. Euron's fleet unleashed scorpions, vast iron bolts that tore the air and lashed at the dragons. One struck Viserion, sending the golden dragons spiraling into the bay. Rage overtook Jorah, a fury not entirely his own. He swept down on Drogon, fire spilling from the beast's jaws, reducing ships to cinders. Euron's flagship stood defiant, black sails snapping in the wind. Jorah guided Drogon into a dive, fire and shadow falling upon the Ironborn. The decks erupted in flame, sailors hurling themselves into the water. Euron himself emerged, axe in hand, eyes wild. He screamed curses at the sky as Jorah circled. Come down, bear. Let's see if you bleed. Jorah landed atop the burning wreck, Drogon's claws raking the deck. Euron charged, fearless to the last. Jorah met him blade to blade, a clash of iron and will. The Iron King fought like a madman, but Jorah had dragonfire in his veins. With a cry, he knocked Euron's axe aside and sent him tumbling into the flames. The ship buckled, Drogon took to the air, and the last of Euron's fleet burned in the bay. Daenerys met him on the shore, blood spattered on her tunic, eyes blazing. Together they knelt beside Viserion's broken form. The dragon's great heart slowing, his breaths shallow. Jorah pressed his forehead to the scaled brow, tears mingling with soot. Fly, brother, he whispered, feeling the beast's pain as his own. Fly if you can. Daenerys knelt beside him, her hand on his shoulder, sharing in the loss. The city gathered in silence, watching as the queen and her champion mourned the passing of the dragon. They burned Viserion on the hill above the city, a pyre seen for miles. The smoke drifted across the realm, a sign that the age of dragons was not unending, that even gods could die. Jorah watched the flames, the fire reflected in his eyes, and felt a change within him. He was mortal, after all. The power that had remade him was not endless. The dragons would not rule forever. The realm must be remade, not with fire, but with justice. In the months that followed, Daenerys' reign grew steady. The dragons, fewer now, became less a threat, and more a legend. Jorah remained at her side, her general, her protector, her bridge between fire and flesh. On the anniversary of their victory, the city erupted in festival. Bells rang, banners unfurled, and Daenerys paraded through the streets on Drogon's back, Jorah beside her astride Rhaegal. The people cheered, hope and fear mingling in their cries. For the first time, Jorah saw not dread in their faces, but awe, admiration, and even love. That night, Daenerys came to him as he watched the dragons circling the moonlit towers. You have given me everything, she said softly. Without you, I would not have conquered. Without you, I would not have survived. What would you ask of me, Jorah? He searched her face, feeling the weight of all he had ever been, all he had become, only to serve, only to protect you, only to see the realm at peace. She drew him close, her hands gentle. Then let us make peace together. They stood upon the balcony, watching the city breathe beneath them, the future unwritten. Above, the dragons wheeled and roared. But for the first time, Jorah felt only calm. He was no longer the exiled bear, nor merely the fire-touched. He was a man remade, by pain, by loyalty, by love, and by the fire of dragons. The story of Jorah Mormont, last of Bear Island, would echo through the ages, not as a tale of exile or shame, but as the song of the dragons chosen, the first of a new breed. And in that dawn, as fire and shadow danced across the world, the promise of peace glimmered. Fragile as hope, enduring as legend. Ah, ta. Moonlight silvered the rooftops of King's Landing, washing the city in a pallid glow that softened scars and soot. The air was still, the hush of anticipation thick as snow before a storm. In the silence, the palace breathed. Stone and shadow, lingering sorrow and hope. High above, Daenerys stood at the edge of the Queen's Tower, her arms wrapped tight about herself as she gazed across the restless city. Jorah Mormont moved through the corridors toward her, his steps soundless, his shadow long and dark against the walls. He had changed since the first fires of conquest had blazed. There was a weight to him now, a quiet certainty, and something older still, a touch of wildness that came from days spent flying through clouds, fire in his throat and the world at his feet. People whispered that he could speak to the dragons, that he was half beast, half man, a creature out of Valyria's oldest tales. He knew the truth was stranger and sadder. He was only a man, remade by pain and loyalty, and by a love he had tried to bury again and again. He found Daenerys in the chill wind, her hair stirring like a banner. She didn't turn as he approached, but she knew it was him. "You don't sleep anymore, Sir Jorah," she said softly. "I sleep when I can, Khaleesi. The city never truly does." She nodded, gaze never leaving the horizon. "The peace is uneasy. The city waits for my mercy, for my rage. There are those who think I rule only through you and the dragons." He was silent a moment, choosing his words. "They are right to be wary. Dragons inspire awe and fear, but peace requires trust. Fear will keep the lords in line, but it will not make them love you. You have to give them reason to hope." A faint, weary smile touched her lips. "And if hope fails, then they will remember your justice." He stepped closer, his presence steady as the stones beneath their feet. "Let me fly to the Riverlands. Let me quell the rebellion in your name. Let them see that the dragons serve justice, not only fire." She looked at him, her violet eyes ringed with tired shadows. "You would leave me then?" "For a time. When I return, the lords of the Riverlands will kneel, not from terror, but from respect." He hesitated, lowering his voice. "You have always had my heart, Daenerys. Let me give you my sword again in truth." "No." She placed a hand on his arm, fingers cold, trembling. "Go then. Bring peace with you when you return." Rhaegal waited in the courtyard, restless, tail lashing in the moonlit dust. He bent his head as Jorah approached, allowing the night to mount. Their bond was wordless, built in fire and flight. Jorah tightened his grip and gave the old Valyrian word Daenerys had taught him. Vazoth. Fly. The city fell away in a rush of wings and wind. They soared north, stars spinning overhead. The scent of autumn carried on the air. Jorah guided Rhaegal above the Roserad, passing burned fields and silent villages. War had scarred the land, and fear still lingered like a poison. But in the pale light before dawn, he saw farmers return to their fields, children daring to play in the ruins. Life, stubborn and fragile, was returning. He reached Harrenhal as the sun rose, the castle's blackened towers looming over the river mists. Here, Lord Glover and the remnants of the Lannister and Frey armies held out, refusing to bend the knee. They expected vengeance, but Jorah brought a different message. He landed Rhaegal before the shattered gates, the great dragon folding his wings with a thunderous hiss. Soldiers fell back in terror, but Jorah raised his empty hands, his voice carrying, "I come not as your conqueror, but as your queen's envoy. Bend the knee, and you will know her justice. Defy her, and you will see fire." Lord Glover, a hard man with ice in his beard, spat on the ground. "We do not kneel to foreign fire. Harrenhal belongs to the north, as it did before the dragons." Jorah dismounted, his boots sinking into mud and ash. "It was dragon fire that forged Harrenhal's ruin. It can just as easily build again. If you want peace, lay down your arms. The wars are done." There was a tense silence, broken only by the rasp of steel and the faint whimper of a child behind the walls. At last, Glover dropped to one knee. "If it must be, it must be. One by one the others followed, battered by defeat, hungry for peace. Jorah nodded to Rhaegal, who lifted his head and sent a gout of green flame skyward. A promise and a warning. That evening, Jorah met with the lords in Harrenhal's ruined hall. He ate their bread and salt, drank their sour wine, and listened as they poured out their grievances, their hunger, their bitterness, their need to believe in something more than terror. He offered Daenerys peace, her word that the North and Riverlands would be rebuilt, that the horrors of war would not return with the dragons. Some doubted, some grumbled, but all agreed. The war was done. He left Rhaegal at Harrenhal, instructing the beast to guard the castle, but harm no man or child. The dragon watched him with an intelligence that went deeper than words, a trust that was not born of fear. Jorah rode south with an escort of men who had been his enemies the day before. He spoke with the small folk, listened to their sorrows, gave orders to repair bridges, to feed the starving. He saw himself in their eyes, weary, scarred but not broken. It was not victory that healed the realm, but the slow, stubborn work of peace. The weeks became months. The city grew calmer, the streets safer. Daenerys held court each morning, receiving petitions from freedmen and lords alike. She built granaries, repaired the aqueducts, listened to her counsel with patience. The people, slow as the tides, began to trust. The bells rang not in terror, but in celebration. Jorah returned, exhausted, his cloak stained by travel and rain. Daenerys met him in the throne room, her face lit by the dawn. The look she gave him was not one of a queen for a subject, but of a friend for a friend. "You kept your promise," she said, voice thick with relief. He bowed his head. "The North and Riverlands have accepted your peace. The lords will send men for the harvest. There will be no more fighting." She stepped close, her fingers gentle as she brushed a leaf from his hair. "You have given me everything, Jorah. What do you wish in return?" He hesitated, his heart pounding. "To remain at your side, to help you build what the dragons began." She smiled, warm and weary. "Then stay, my friend. Rule with me. Not as king nor consort, but as my equal." The offer stunned him. He had never dreamed of such honor. He fell to one knee, not in fealty, but in gratitude. "I will." The years unfolded, and a new peace blossomed in Westeros. The scars of conquest faded, though never entirely vanished. Daenerys ruled from the Iron Throne, her word, law. At her side, Jorah became the Lord Commander of the Queen's Guard, her closest advisor, and in time, the father of her Council of Lords. He spoke with lords and ladies, with smiths and street children. He became a bridge between dragon and man, fire and flesh. The dragons, too, changed. Rhaegal, wild but gentle, ranged across the Reach, hunting game but never livestock or man. Drogon remained the Queen's mount, fierce and proud, but learned to bow his head to the small children who flocked to the palace gardens, begging for a glimpse of the Black Dread reborn. With time, Daenerys and Jorah allowed the dragons to mate, and from their eggs a new clutch hatched, smaller, less wild, yet still wondrous. The people of Westeros, who had once cowered from the shadows above, now looked to the skies with hope. The dragons became symbols of a new age, not of conquest, but of unity. Jorah's hair grew white at the temples, his scars faded. He walked the city in plain clothes, often pausing to help a child fix a toy, or listen to the woes of a widow. The people came to know him not as a monster, but as a man. He was no longer Jorah the exile, nor Jorah the fire-touched. He was the shield of the city, the friend of the queen, the peacemaker. Yet, even in peace, old ghosts lingered. Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell, sent cautious letters from the north, her words edged with suspicion and longing for independence. The Reach, long proud, bristled at the memory of dragonfire. In the east, rumors grew of new dangers: sorcerers in Asshai, slavers plotting vengeance in Volantis, a Dothraki Khalasar gathering strength. Daenerys and Jorah faced these threats as one. When slavers tried to assassinate Daenerys with poison, It was Jorah who found the culprit, his old skills as a spy undimmed. When wildlings pressed against the wall, it was Jorah who flew north with Rhaegal, his presence a warning and a promise of peace. But the greatest test came not from without, but from within. One spring, as the snows melted from the black water and the city burst into flower, a strange illness struck the children of the city. They grew feverish, skin turning gray and hard, the signs of Greyscale unmistakable. Panic swept the streets. Memories of Stannis Baratheon's doomed daughter and tales of stone men in the ruins sent people fleeing to the temples, begging the queen for salvation. Jorah felt dread twist his heart. He remembered his own curse, the agony, the shame. He remembered the fire that had saved him, and the dragon's gift. He saw Daenerys in her chambers, her face pale with worry. "It's Greyscale," she whispered. "The healers are powerless." He knelt beside her. "I have been cured once. Let me try again. Perhaps if Rhaegal burns the curse from one, as Drogon did for me." She nodded, desperate. "Try, Jorah. If there is any hope, I trust you." Mensande. They brought the sickest child to the palace, an orphan girl, her eyes bright with terror, her skin hardening by the hour. Jorah comforted her, singing old Bear Island songs as he had once sung for his kin. Then, in the gardens where the dragons basked, he called to Rhaegal. The dragon came, slow and solemn, bowing his head at Jorah's command. Jorah held the girl in his arms, bracing himself as he had years ago. "Burn only the stone," he whispered. "Leave the flesh." Rhaegal unleashed a thin stream of green flame, hot but controlled, swirling about the girl's arm. She screamed, but Jorah held firm, singing, comforting, praying. When the fire faded, the gray was gone. The girl's flesh was pink and raw, but alive. Word spread like wildfire. The dragons could cure as well as kill. One by one the sick were brought to the palace, and under Jorah's care and the dragon's flame, they survived. Fear turned to awe, awe to devotion. Jorah became not just a peacemaker, but a healer, a living legend. The realm changed. The old hatreds faded. The queen was loved, the dragons revered. Jorah Mormont, the exile, the traitor, became the hope of a new age. And in the peace that followed, in the years when the dragons soared over fields of gold and wheat, Daenerys and Jorah stood side by side at the gates of the city, watching the children play beneath wings of shadow. He was no king, nor lord, nor dragon. He was only a man. But in the song of the realm, his name was whispered, as softly as prayer, as fiercely as fire. For he had learned at last that true strength was not in dragons or swords, but in the hard, patient work of healing a broken world, and in the quiet, unyielding love that bound him forever to his queen. Ya. Ka. Spring melted into summer in King's Landing, and for the first time in living memory the bells rang only for celebration, never for warning, never for war. In the shadow of the Red Keep, the city flowered, the stench of death and soot slowly replaced by the scent of bread, roasting lamb, and wild flowers spilling from every market stall. The markets teemed with new faces from the Reach, Dorne, the Riverlands, even as far as Bravos and Pentos. Where once merchants had cowered behind barricades, now they called their wares with pride. Children played along the banks of the Blackwater, running in packs beneath banners, bearing both the dragon and the bear. Jorah walked among them daily, sometimes with Daenerys, more often alone, his cloak plain and his sword, peace bound. Where once folk flinched from his presence, they now greeted him openly, some touching his hand for luck, others offering loaves or garlands of daisies. They called him the Queen's Bear, but more often, the Dragon Friend. The stories grew. He'd once bested 3 sellswords with only his voice. He'd wept for an orphaned baker's daughter. He'd stood alone in the dragon pit and commanded the beasts with a word. In every tale, the dragons served not as terrors, but as protectors, emblems of a hope that did not burn, but nurtured. At the heart of it all was Daenerys, The queens progressed through the city each week, became a festival of its own. Rhaegal and Drogon soared above, never menacing. Their shadows a promise that as long as she ruled, no invader would breach these walls. The queen greeted old women, played with children, listened to the merchants' complaints as if every word was a jewel. And at her side, sometimes a step behind, sometimes at her shoulder, was Jorah. Their partnership became legend. In the council chamber, lords bickered and plotted, always in measured voices when Jorah's eyes rested on them. His presence was steel, Daenerys was fire, and together they shaped a court unlike any King's Landing had known. A council of maesters, knights, freedmen, and even a merchant from Lys gave voice to every class and province. Tyrion grown Ponchier managed coin and trade. Missandei tracked the welfare of orphans and freedmen. Grey Worm commanded the Unsullied, though he too had found a strange peace, leading drills for city children in the squares, their laughter bright against the sun. One night, as dusk purpled the city and lanterns kindled along the river, Jorah and Daenerys stood at the highest balcony of Maegor's Holdfast. Below, a midsummer feast spilled through the streets. Musicians piping wild tunes, acrobats tumbling amid showers of flower petals. The dragon circled lazily above, casting fleeting shadows that made the crowd cheer. Daenerys' hand brushed his as they watched the revel. "You see them, Jorah? A city not of fear, but of joy. I never thought I would live to see this day." He smiled. "You made it happen, Khaleesi. You brought hope where there was none, Detail." She studied him, something gentle in her gaze. "And you, who brought peace where I could only bring fire. The people love you almost as much as the dragons." He looked away, his cheeks warming. "It's you they love. I'm just your shadow." She caught his hand and held it, her fingers soft, cool. "You are my strength. Never doubt that." A silence grew between them, heavy with all that had been said and all that could never be. At last Daenerys released his hand and turned to watch Drogon's spiral, her eyes shining. As the months passed, the first true test of their new peace emerged, not in rebellion or treachery, but in need. A blight struck the fields outside the city, threatening famine. The small folk murmured that it was the old god's revenge for Dragonfire. Some remembered tales of famine in the years before Robert's rebellion. Fear rose like floodwater. The granaries, filled by Daenerys' foresight, held enough for months, but the lords of the Reach hoarded their stores, demanding higher prices or greater favor. In the council, tempers flared. Tyrion wrung his hands, his sons grim. "The city will eat, but at the cost of our coffers and our alliances." Lord Grafton of Gulltown, tall and cold, argued, "Send the dragons to Highgarden. Burn a field or two and the Tyrells will yield." Then too, Jorah spoke quietly, but every head turned at his words. "If we threaten with fire, we will be feared again, not loved. Let me ride to Highgarden as envoy. Let the dragons stay in King's Landing, a symbol of peace." The queen agreed. She pressed a ring into his palm, set with a ruby and inscribed with a word in Old Valyrian. "Hope. Carry this as my token," she said. "Let them know the Queen's bear comes not for war, but for the harvest." He set out at dawn, accompanied by a handful of Queen's guards and Rhaegal soaring far above, a green promise against the sky. The road wound through fields stunted and brown, villages sullen with hunger. At every stop, Jorah spoke to the people, listened to their complaints, and left coin or bread where he could. He took their stories with him, intending to return with help or hope, not fire. At Highgarden, Lady Olenna Tyrell, old as root and sharp as winter frost, received him in her rose garden. The Queen's bear, tapping her cane, "You look more knight than monster. They say you're the only man the dragons truly heed." "I serve the Queen," Jorah replied. "She wishes friendship, not threats." Olenna cackled. "Friendship is expensive, Sir Jorah. But hunger is dearer still. Why shouldn't I sell my grain to Bravos for a better price?" He showed her the ring. "The Queen offers more than coin. The Queen offers a future. When peace comes, The Tyrells will be first in her council, first in her court. Help us now, and the queen will never forget. Bendirawar. Olenna studied him a long moment. At last, her sharp features softened. You have the look of a man who knows what it is to starve, Mormont. I remember you from Robert's court, when your cloak was threadbare and your eyes hollow. Perhaps you have learned wisdom since then. Very well, my grain for your queen's promise, but if she forgets, remember, I do not. They struck the bargain, and the granaries of the Reach opened. Within days, carts laden with barley, oats, and wheat rolled into King's Landing, greeted as if they carried gold. Daenerys presided over the first great harvest feast, inviting small folk and lords alike, sharing her table with orphans, smiths, and even a ragged bard from the Stormlands. Jorah sat beside her, their triumph quiet, the peace hard won. News of the harvest feast rippled through the realm. Sansa Stark sent her congratulations and, after long negotiation, a promise of trade with the north, saltfish and root vegetables for southern grain and fruit. In Dorne, Princess Arianne Martell invited Daenerys to Sunspear to sign a treaty binding the southernmost realm to the Dragon Throne. From Old Town, the Archmaesters sent word that the Queen's healer, Jorah himself, would be honored with a white rod, symbol of healing and wisdom. It was not just the realm that changed. The dragons, too, grew less wild. Drogon let the children of the city touch his scales, so long as Daenerys watched. Rhaegal slept in the Queen's gardens, tail curled around a marble fountain, his great eye winking at Jorah as he walked by. The youngest dragons, hatched from the clutch the year before, tumbled through the palace corridors, their shrill cries a source of endless delight for both court and commoner. But with peace came new dangers, subtle as poison. Some lords muttered that Daenerys' reliance on Jorah, an exile, a Northman, a man with no true claim, was dangerous. Whispers wound through the court, that he had too much power, that the dragons answered to him before even their queen. Some speculated darkly that he was more than her advisor, that he was her lover, her secret king. Jorah ignored the rumors. He had weathered far worse. But he watched carefully, ever on guard, knowing that envy and pride had slain as many kings as swords or fire. When a scuffle in the court kitchens ended with a cook's death, "Greyscale," said the maester. Not poison. Jorah himself inspected every servant, every hall, and every flagon that touched the Queen's lips. He trusted no one with her life but himself. One night, a would-be assassin crept through the dragon pit, hoping to slip past the dozing beasts and enter the Queen's solar. The man never made it farther than the first stair. Drogon's fire, summoned by Jorah's single word, turned him to ash. In the aftermath, Daenerys summoned her court and declared, "The dragons are not just fire and death. They are my justice and my judgment. Any who threaten this peace threaten me." Jorah stood behind her as the banners bowed, knowing the balance was delicate. But for now, peace held. Years passed, and the city grew more beautiful with each spring. Jorah's hair turned wholly silver, his scars faded to faint reminders of another life. The children he had once healed now played at his feet in the palace gardens, calling him Grandfather Bear. Daenerys ruled with wisdom and compassion. Her council strong, her people loyal. The dragons, old and young, became legend, guardians of the city, healers as much as weapons. One summer evening, Jorah sat with Daenerys in the Queen's solar, the city aglow beyond the windows. She was reading a letter from Sansa Stark, her brow furrowed in thought. "Sansa wishes to send her son to court," Daenerys said. "She wants him to learn of dragons and peace." Jorah smiled. "Then let him come. Let the realm see what peace can build." "No." She put the letter aside, studying him, her expression softer than he had ever seen. "You have given me more than counsel, Jorah. You have given me a kingdom and a family. I am not afraid anymore." He took her hand, old fears at last at rest. "You will never be alone. Not while I live." The dragons called outside, their voices rising like music over the city. A chorus of hope and memory, wildness and peace. Jorah and Daenerys stood together at the window, watching their legacy soar above the rooftops. Knowing that whatever storms might come, they had remade the world, not with fire alone, but with healing and steadfast love. And for the first time in all his days, Jorah Mormont felt at home, at peace, not as an exile or a conqueror, or even a dragon's chosen, but as a man whose story had become the very heart of a realm reborn. Autumn descended on King's Landing, and the riverlands in a blaze of gold and scarlet, the wind sharper now, the sky pale and clear above the city's towers. The peace Daenerys and Jorah had wrought had lasted through 7 harvests, and it showed in every bustling square, in every field now heavy with grain. Markets spilled across the city's hills, merchants hawking apples, pears, pomegranates, sacks of flour from the Reach and smoked fish from the north. Children chased each other beneath the long shadows of dragons at rest, their shrieks of laughter mixing with the deep, rolling purrs of Rhaegal and Drogon sunning themselves on the ramparts. For Jorah Mormont, these were the richest days of his long, hard life. The ache of old wounds bothered him in the mornings, but he bore them gladly. Each sunrise meant another day walking the city in peace. Another day at Daenerys' side, no longer her shadow, nor only her sword, but the first of her council, the Queen's bear and the dragon's confidant. He had grown thinner and grayer, yet his strength did not wane. His smile, so rarely seen in his youth, came easily now, and he spent his afternoons listening to small folks' petitions in the courts and halls, drinking honey wine with Tyrion, or letting the smallest of the palace's new dragons, a green she-dragon called Vernah, curl around his shoulders and snort smoke into his hair. On the day the northern delegation arrived, banners snapped from every spire. The gates were flung wide. Sansa Stark herself led the procession, pale and stately as winter, her auburn hair braided with silver to honor her queen. With her rode her eldest son, Edric, 12 years old, tall for his age, his eyes as blue as a summer sky, his wolf banner streaming behind him. Daenerys met them at the steps of the Red Keep. Drogon crouched above, his huge head looming, golden eyes unblinking as the northern lords approached. Sansa dismounted and bowed, her boy with her, and Daenerys drew her up with a laugh, kissing her cheeks as if they were sisters parted only a day, not a kingdom's width apart. "My lady of Winterfell, you honor us with your presence," Daenerys said, and Sansa's smile was real, touched with both pride and relief. Edric's eyes were wide, fixed on Drogon and the smaller dragons now circling overhead. He stepped forward, chin up, and bowed as Jorah had taught the city's children. "Your Grace," he said, "I've come to see the dragons and to serve as your ward, if it pleases you." "It pleases me greatly," Daenerys said, and beckoned Jorah forward. "Sir Jorah will see to your lessons. You'll learn from the best knight in the realm, and from the dragons themselves." Jorah knelt before the boy, hiding a smile. "Welcome to King's Landing, Edric Stark. Are you brave enough to touch a dragon?" The boy nodded, lips pressed tight but his eyes gleaming. Jorah guided his hand to Vernah, whose scales gleamed emerald and gold. The dragon regarded the boy with slitted eyes, then, after a long sniff, allowed the touch, her tongue flicking warm and rough over Edric's hand. The city erupted in cheers. The peace was sealed. The weeks that followed were filled with feasting, tournaments, and councils. Edric and the Stark men trained with Jorah and the Queen's Guard, learning swordplay and tactics beneath the watchful eyes of the Queen and her dragons. Sansa and Daenerys spent long hours in the solar, sharing letters from lords and merchants, planning the next harvest, and debating alliances with the free cities. The two women became sisters in truth, each trusting the other in ways they had never dared before. But peace was never free from shadow. Messengers arrived from the east, bearing tidings that disturbed the court. In Volantis, the fires of the Red Temple burned bright, and new priests whispered that the true dragon, the Promised One, had yet to come. Dothraki Khalazars, once scattered, gathered again under a new Khal Moro, a blood rider who remembered Daenerys' flight across the Sea of Grass. Slavers in Astapor and Yunkai rebuilt their fleets. hungry to reclaim what had been lost. Even the Iron Islands stirred, their young lords boasting they would take the Stepstones, perhaps even Old Town, before the dragons could cross the reach. Daenerys called her council at dusk, the dragons slumbering on the roof above the solar, the room filled with the scent of parchment and smoke. Tyrion poured wine for all and waited, eyes sharp and heavy with care. "The world is watching, Your Grace," he said quietly. "Some wait to challenge your rule. Others wait to see if the peace you've built will hold without blood." Benderawadi. Jorah rested a hand on the hilt of his sword, his mind already leaping to the tasks ahead. "We cannot meet every threat with fire. The people love you, Khaleesi. But the lords are wary. They will not risk another war if they see the dragons are keepers of the peace, not its destroyers." Sansa nodded. "If you send the dragons north and south, to the Dothraki Sea and to Volantis, you will frighten them into alliance, or at least delay their plans." Tyrion frowned. "The dragons are not invincible. If you stretch them too thin, your enemies may find a way to strike at your heart, at you or the city." Daenerys looked to Jorah. "What would you do, my bear?" He considered for a long moment. "Let me fly to the east, with Rhaegal and Vernah. I will show the Volantines and slavers that your justice is alive, not just your power. Send Grey Worm and an embassy to the Iron Islands. Make peace if you can, promise gold if you must. Keep Drogon here in King's Landing with you, a living banner above your throne. The city will feel safe." She nodded, resolve shining in her eyes. "It will be as you say. The world will see the peace we have forged, and know it is stronger than fear." Jorah left at dawn, accompanied by Rhaegal and Vernah. Edric Stark begged to ride with him, and though Sansa protested, Daenerys herself pressed a hand to her friend's shoulder. "Let the boy see what the world is. Let him learn from the best." The journey east was swift and strange. Jorah, Edric, and a handful of Queen's Guard flew across the narrow sea, over islands and rivers, through skies that darkened with the smoke of distant wars. They landed in Volantis to find the city thrumming with tension. Red priests and priestesses filled the streets, chanting of fire and prophecy. Slaver ships patrolled the harbor, but none dared raise arms when Rhaegal circled overhead, his roar echoing down the temple of Arilor. Jorah met the triarchs and high priests in the great hall of Volantis. He bore Daenerys' seal and her words, that the peace in Westeros would spread to the east, that no slaver fleet would cross the sea without meeting dragonfire, and that Daenerys Targaryen offered trade and freedom in place of ruin. He let Edric stand at his side, his very presence, young, northern, unbroken. Proof that the peace of the Dragon Queen was not only for her own. The priests wavered, some fearing the dragons, others lusting after the power they represented. But the small folk cheered Jorah in the streets, throwing petals and coins at his feet, crying out that the Bear of the West had come to save them. The merchants, practical men, agreed to Daenerys' terms. Slaver ships were turned away, their hulls set ablaze when they tried to run the blockade. The Red Priests, after seeing Verna torch an effigy of the old masters, declared that the true dragon's justice had come at last. Jorah stayed for weeks, teaching Edric the ways of the free cities, watching over trade agreements, listening to whispers of rebellion. He heard stories of a sorcerer in Ashai, who claimed to summon shadows, of Dothraki gathering in the far east, and of unrest in the Summer Isles. But peace, hard, bright, and fragile, held. When at last Jorah and Edric flew home, they returned to a city readying for winter. But unafraid, Daenerys met them at the gates, her face alight. "What news from Volantis, my bear?" "Peace, Khaleesi, and hope. The world will not dare break your reign." The queen gathered her council and heard every word, her eyes fixed on Edric when he told tales of dragons over the summer sea, of people who cheered not for fire but for freedom. At the end of that council, Daenerys rose and declared, "Let the world remember this day. Let every lord and every small folk know. The dragons will never rule through fear alone. Justice is our shield and hope our sword." Now, Jorah stood at her side as the banners unfurled, as bells pealed across the city, as the dragons soared above a realm that at last was whole. Years would pass, and challenges would return. Storms would break, and enemies would rise in distant lands. But the memory of this age, the age of Daenerys and her bear, of dragons who healed as well as burned, would echo for generations, a song not of conquest or ruin, but of the hard-won peace that grew from fire and the unyielding love of those who forged it. Yeah. The first frost came early that year, delicate crystals forming on the marble balustrades of the Red Keep, the city beneath the hill waking to the white hush of dawn. For the people of King's Landing, winter was a curiosity, spoken of in song and story, a distant threat. But to Jorah Mormont, the wind that swept through the streets tasted of home. He walked the high walls before sunrise, cloak drawn tight, watching his breath plume in the cold. Below, the city roused to a new day, banners fluttering above the market, smoke rising from countless hearths. Somewhere, a baker's boy laughed, the sound echoing in the crisp air. The dragons reveled in the changing weather. Rhaegal hunted farther afield, plunging through mists over the Blackwater, scattering deer and wild boar for leagues. Drogon spent more hours basking atop the hot tiles of the palace roof, his massive form curling in contentment, his wing beats shaking frost from the ramparts. The younger dragons, no longer hatchlings but not yet full-grown, tumbled across the lawns, their shrieks and whistles drawing 100 children to the palace gates. It was a season of peace, but it was also a season of reckoning. The Queen's Council had grown older, lines deepening on even Tyrion's clever face. And in the city's alleys and squares, the first rumors of new unrest flickered. The Ironborn had not been silent since their embassy, and now a new fleet was rumored in the Narrow Sea. In the free cities, old alliances frayed, and even in the Reach, ambitious cousins of the Tyrells stirred. Jorah saw to all these matters, his days a steady rhythm of council, city rounds and afternoons spent at Daenerys' side. Edric Stark, grown taller and surer with every moon, shadowed him everywhere, a wolf in the making with a dragon's curiosity. The boy's quick mind soaked up every lesson. How to judge disputes, when to trust and when to doubt. The strange dance of coin and honor that ruled the court. One evening, as the sun set in a riot of fire over the bay, Daenerys summoned Jorah to her solar. She sat by the hearth, a book open on her knees, her hair loose about her shoulders, her expression thoughtful. 7 winters and 7 summers, Jorah, she said, voice quiet. And still you serve me. What did you dream for yourself in all those years of exile? When you first crossed the Narrow Sea, what hope did you carry? And I wonder. He settled in the chair beside her, searching her face, the lines of sorrow and joy etched deep now. I hoped for forgiveness, for a place in your service, for an end to shame. I never dreamed I'd find all that, and peace. She smiled, a rare, gentle thing. You gave more than you took, my friend. I could never have ruled alone. There are those who whisper I should have taken another husband, some bright young lord, or a king of foreign blood. They say you are too old, too scarred, too loyal. And now, his heart thudded with the familiar ache, that old, unyielding love. And what do you say, Khaleesi? I say there is no one I trust as I trust you. No one who knows both my heart and my dragons. What we have built, we have built, we have built together. If I am remembered with love, it will be because you taught me mercy. She rose and crossed to the window, looking down over the city where torches now kindled in the dusk, the dragons beginning their nightly flights. Sometimes I dream of flying north. She said softly, of seeing Bear Island, the wall, the lands you left behind. Would you take me there, Jorah, when peace is secure? He rose and bowed, unable to hide his smile. I would take you anywhere in the world. She turned to him, laughter and something like hope in her eyes. Then one day, we will go together. Before that dream could take root, the world sent new trials. Winter's deepening cold brought sickness to the city's poorer districts. Coughs that rattled in the night, fevers that would not break. The Queen's healers worked day and night, aided by Jorah, who had never lost the knowledge of wounds and illness learned in distant Essos. Greyscale did not return, though the memory of that scourge still haunted the people. But the winter fevers were cruel enough. Jorah rode daily to the city's worst afflicted streets, Rhaegal circling overhead. His presence was enough to calm the desperate, to bring a measure of order where none else could. He carried soup and firewood, blankets and coin, and the queen's own promise that no child would starve while the dragons watched the walls. One afternoon, as snowflakes began to whirl through the city, Jorah found a girl, no more than 6, curled in an alley, her face flushed with fever, her breaths shallow. He carried her to the palace himself, braving the whispers that rose in his wake. Daenerys came down to the kitchens and sat with the child, bathing her brow, whispering gentle words. By dawn, the girl's fever had broken, and word spread like wildfire. The queen and her bear would save any who asked. The city changed. Neighbors watched over one another. Brawlers laid down knives to help haul wood for a sickly family. Even the roughest dockman grumbled less, quick to give up a place at the baker's for a mother with hungry children. For every whisper of unrest, a dozen small mercies flowered. As the worst of the sickness passed, a delegation arrived from the Iron Islands. The lords brought grim tidings. The youngest Greyjoys, denied power for years, had begun riding again, their longships sacking villages along the western coasts. Jorah met with their captains beneath Drogon's looming shadow, his words few and sharp as iron. Your queen has offered peace and trade. The dragons brought fire once. They will again, if you break her law. The captains, seeing Rhaegal sunning himself with Edric perched on his back, did not argue. Instead, they returned to their ships, and for the first time in memory, the Ironborn kept their word. Late that winter, a letter arrived from the north. Sansa Stark's familiar hand wrote of wolves seen on the wall, of wildlings sending warnings from beyond the snows. Strange lights in the sky, old magic stirring. There were even tales of the dead, though none believed them. Daenerys read the letter by candlelight, her brows drawn tight. The old threats return. Will we never know a peace without shadow? Jorah covered her hand with his own, the simple touch steadying her. We have built something stronger than fear. Whatever comes, we will face it together. She looked at him, her face shining in the candlelight. You speak as if we are more than queen and knight. Perhaps we are, he whispered. After all this time, what else could we be? He rose and knelt, not in fealty, but in offering. Let me stand with you, Daenerys, whatever comes. She leaned forward, kissed his brow, and drew him to his feet. Always. Spring brought renewal, the fever's gone, the streets swept clean, new buds opening in the palace gardens. Edric, now nearly a man grown, prepared to return to Winterfell, bearing stories of dragons, of justice, of the queen's peace. Before he left, he walked with Jorah along the city walls, the wind sharp and bracing. I came as a boy, Edric said. I leave as your son, in all but blood. I hope I can be as strong a lord as you, Sir Jorah. Jorah clapped him on the shoulder, pride and sadness mingling. You will be better, Edric Stark. Remember what you saw here. Lead with mercy, not just strength. Now, the boy grinned, his face still young but his voice sure. I will. I swear it. As the Starks rode north, Rhaegal flew above them, a silent guardian, circling once before banking away to return to the palace. The city watched them go, and for a little while, all seemed well. Yet as the year wore on, word of unrest crept back into the city. The Summer Isles sent warnings of pirates grown bold. In the east, a new cult rose, hailing a queen of fire to rival Daenerys' legend. In Dorne, an old wound reopened when a cousin of the Martells was murdered by rivals. Each fresh tidings brought new burdens to Daenerys, whose laughter grew less frequent, whose steps grew heavy with care. Jorah stood at her side as ever, soothing rifts, gathering intelligence, flying to distant keeps as needed. He grew tired, but he pressed on, unwilling to let the world's shadow touch his queen. On a warm night in late summer, the queen called a feast. Lords and ladies from every corner of Westeros filled the hall. The dragons, grown vast and beautiful, circled above the city, their cries echoing from the hills. Music swelled, dancers spun, and the people rejoiced in the bounty of peace. Daenerys, resplendent in crimson and gold, raised her goblet to the hall. Tonight, we celebrate not conquest, but unity. The dragons brought fear, but you, my people, brought hope. Let this be the legacy we leave. The hall rang with cheers. Jorah, standing at her right, caught her gaze and saw tears shining in her eyes. After the feast, beneath a moonlit sky, Daenerys and Jorah walked the gardens, the scent of jasmine and wild roses sweet on the air. They spoke of old times, of battles and losses, of joys and laughter. At last, Daenerys stopped, turning to him. The world will never be free from danger. But I am not afraid, not anymore. As long as I have you, my bear, my heart, I will face whatever comes. He took her hand, old fears melting away. We have remade the world, Khaleesi. Let the next age remember it was built by love, not fire alone. Mansuhatshehu. Above them the dragons sang, and the night stretched wide and peaceful, holding them both in its gentle embrace. The peace endured, and so did the memory of a queen who ruled with justice, of a knight who gave everything, of dragons who watched over a realm not of ashes, but of hope. And Jorah Mormont, once broken and cursed, found his redemption not in victory, but in the quiet, unyielding love he bore for his queen and for the world they forged together. Winter ebbed with stubborn slowness, but the peace Daenerys and Jorah had wrestled from chaos held fast as the realm shifted into another turning of the year. King's Landing glistened beneath chill morning dew, its rooftops white where the frost lingered in the shadows. The small folk bundled themselves against the wind, yet laughter rang clear in the markets, and the queen's banners, red and black entwined with the green bear, snapped proudly over the city's high towers. In the council chamber, the old guard presided. Tyrion, his face lined and wise, Missandei now grown gray at the temples, Grey Worm standing straighter and more solemn than ever. Jorah watched over them as always, his sword laid aside. The scars of exile and fire faded to little more than a memory. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had found his purpose, and held to it as fiercely as any knight to a shield. Daenerys ruled with a gentle hand, her court filled with the sons and daughters of lords who had once called her usurper, her palace gardens alive with the voices of children from every corner of the realm. Some were the wards of distant lords, others orphaned in wars long past, a few the offspring of freedmen and merchants who had risen in the new order. She made no distinction between them, nor did Jorah. He saw in their faces a future untouched by the horrors that had marred his own youth. Children who would never know the taste of ashes or the chill of exile. One bright morning, as Daenerys strolled through the palace gardens with Jorah, a messenger came running. A lean, dusty boy from Old Town, cheeks pink with cold. He knelt before the queen and proffered a scroll, sealed with the mark of the citadel. "Speak," Daenerys said, her tone gentle. "What news do you bring?" "Your Grace, the Archmaester asks your leave to send scholars north, to study the wall, the wildlings, the remnants of old magics. He hopes your dragons might carry them." Daenerys glanced at Jorah, a smile playing on her lips. "What do you think, my bear? Shall we give the maesters a taste of the wild north?" Jorah's eyes crinkled in amusement. "So long as they mind their manners around the dragons, I see no harm in it. The wall has its own stories. Let the realm's memory be set down true, not just in song." Daenerys nodded to the boy. "Return to your Archmaester. Rhaegal will bear the first party north in the spring, and my Lord Commander will guide them." The boy bowed low and ran off, and Jorah's heart fluttered, as it always did at the prospect of journeying north. He wondered what remained of Bear Island, if its woods and streams still sang beneath the snow, if its halls were silent, or if some distant cousin ruled in his stead. In the weeks that followed, preparations for the northern expedition consumed Jorah's days. Edric Stark, now returned to King's Landing as Winterfell's emissary, joined in the planning. Daenerys insisted on a great festival before the scholars' departure, turning the palace into a riot of color. Banners from every realm, tables sagging with roasted boar, sweetmeats, pies and casks of Dornish wine. The dragons circled overhead, as if blessing the gathering with their own fierce joy. The night before they were to leave, Jorah and Daenerys stood on the balcony above the city, the wind cold but gentle, the moon caught in her hair. "Do you ever regret it, Khaleesi?" Jorah asked softly. "The war? The exile? The fire that changed everything?" She turned to him, her eyes dark and full of memory. "How could I regret what brought me here? If I had not suffered, I would not know how precious peace is. If I had not lost, I would not know the worth of love." She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "And you, Jorah? What do you feel looking back?" He closed his eyes, remembering the agony of Greyscale, the sting of exile, the loneliness that had driven him across oceans. "I feel grateful. Grateful for the fire that burned away my shame. Grateful for the chance to serve. Grateful to have lived long enough to see the world become new." He squeezed her hand gently. "And grateful for you." They stood a long time in silence, the city glowing below, the dragons' cries echoing like old songs in the night. The journey north began at dawn, Rhaegal leading the way, his emerald wings glimmering in the new light. The party included 2 archmaesters, a dozen scholars and healers, Edric Stark, and a handful of seasoned guards. Daenerys saw them off at the gates, her hand resting on Jorah's shoulder as she gave her blessing. "Remember, you go not only as my sword but as my heart. Bring me back tales of the North, and come home safe." "I will, Khaleesi," Jorah promised. "Always." The flight was long and cold, the landscape below changing from autumn gold to deep green, then white with snow as they crossed into the lands beyond Winterfell. At each village they passed, folk poured into the streets to watch Rhaegal's shadow sweep overhead. At White Harbor, Lord Manderley himself rode out to greet them, offering bread, salt, and steaming mugs of mulled wine. At Winterfell, Sansa Stark embraced Edric and welcomed the company, her eyes softening as she greeted Jorah, whose legend had become nearly as great in the north as in the south. Bear Island was their last stop before the Wall. Jorah found his old home strangely unchanged. The same squat keep, the same wild pines, the same salt tang on the air. His kin greeted him with awe and pride. The island's lady, a distant cousin, round and brisk, presented him with a pelt of white bear and a cup of sour beer brewed by his great niece. "Your story has reached every hearth, Sir Jorah," she said. "We thought you lost, but now you're the stuff of songs. You've made the North proud." Jorah accepted her words with humility, grateful for a peace he had never expected. At the Wall, the scholars marveled at the sheer scale of the ice, its blue heart glittering in the low sun. Wildlings, now settled in villages to the south, came to trade and share stories of the old days. Rhaegal circled the wall itself, sending shimmering shards of ice clattering into the abyss below. Atop the wall, Jorah stood with Edric, the wind howling around them. "It's colder than I remember," Jorah mused. Edric grinned, breath steaming. "A dragon's fire will keep us warm." They lingered through the short northern spring, gathering tales, mapping ruins, learning from the free folk and the last old rangers of the Night's Watch. Jorah listened to every story, adding them to his own, understanding at last that the North's strength lay not in its cold, but in its capacity for survival, for renewal. In late spring, the party returned to King's Landing, laden with new wisdom. Daenerys received them in the throne room, her hair crowned with woven flowers, her smile brighter than any dawn. "Welcome home," she said as Jorah knelt before her, weary but unbowed. "Tell me all you saw." So he did. He spoke of Bear Island, of the Wall, of the wildlings and rangers, and the old magic that lingered still. He told her of the children who laughed when Rhaegal breathed green fire on the snow, of the northern women who sang songs of wolves and dragons together. He told her of kin reclaimed, of peace shared, of the strength that came not from power alone, but from understanding. Daenerys listened, tears in her eyes, her hand in his as if to hold his stories within her heart forever. The years continued to turn. Daenerys and Jorah grew older, their hair streaked with silver, their faces lined with laughter and loss. Their dragons became legends, and the children who once played in the palace gardens became lords, ladies, maesters, healers, and knights in their own right. Edric Stark returned to Winterfell and ruled with wisdom learned in the shadow of dragons. Tyrion's wit never dulled, and Missandei's patience became the model for every scribe and teacher in the realm. When Daenerys last summer waned, she called for Jorah one night as the stars burned above the city. Together they walked the ramparts, the dragon's shadows gliding across the rooftops. The city slept below, safe and whole. "I am not afraid, Jorah," Daenerys whispered. "I leave the world better than I found it." He took her hand, tears unashamed on his cheeks. "You have given it peace, Khaleesi. You have given it hope." She leaned her head on his shoulder, her strength still fierce, her spirit unbroken. "And you have given me love. No queen ever had a truer night." When she passed, it was as the sun rose, her hand in his, the city she had saved radiant in the morning light. Jorah sat by her side, silent and at peace, knowing their story had become legend. A song not of dragons and war, but of mercy, healing, and the love that can mend a broken world. For years after, the city remembered the age of dragons, of Daenerys, the merciful, and Jorah the bear, the knight who healed his queen and her kingdom both. And in every corner of Westeros, from the frost-tipped wall to the gentle shores of Dorne, their memory endured, in laughter, in stories, in the peace they had built, and the hope they had sown. The dragons flew on, wild and beautiful, their shadows touching every heart, a promise that the world could always begin again. The city did not mourn quietly for its queen. The news of Daenerys passing spread like wildfire, not only through the narrow streets and grand halls of King's Landing, but across the fields and rivers of the realm, riding ahead of the ravens that carried the tidings to every corner of Westeros and beyond. Bells tolled for a day and a night. People lit candles at their windows and gathered by the thousands on the hills below the Red Keep. The dragons, sensing loss and confusion, circled the city's spires and towers for hours, their keening cries breaking the hearts of even the hardest men. Jorah Mormont moved through it all, as if in a dream. He did not weep in the sight of others, nor did he flee from the sea of faces that looked to him for guidance. He walked the halls with a careful grace, his face as grave as stone, speaking gently with those who needed comfort, and sharply to those who wished to exploit the moment. When the queen's body was laid out in the throne room, surrounded by flowers from every region, Jorah kept vigil at her side, never sleeping, his hand closed around hers until her skin was colder than winter steel. The realm watched. The dragons watched. On the third morning, Tyrion Lannister, older and heavier, but never diminished in wit, approached him in the soft gold of dawn. "She gave them everything," Tyrion said quietly, his eyes damp. "And you gave her the peace she longed for. Now the question is, who will guard what you both built?" "Nemto." Jorah closed Daenerys' pale hand around a single strand of her silver hair. He let silence stretch for a long moment, then replied, "We will, all of us who loved her. If we fail, then the wheel turns again. If we hold true, maybe the peace will last." Tyrion nodded. "The lords are gathering already. There will be those who hunger for the throne. You know what comes next." Jorah looked down at Daenerys' face, so peaceful in death, as if she merely slept. She wanted peace, not a new war. "I will not let them use her memory for blood." "And now one day." Tyrion touched his shoulder, an uncharacteristic gesture of comfort. "Then let's begin." The council that met in the throne room was the largest King's Landing had seen since the War for the Dawn. Lords and ladies from every great house assembled, Sansa Stark, regal and iron-spined. Edric, now Lord of Winterfell, tall and quiet at her side. Lady Olenna's grandniece from Highgarden, sharp as a thorn, Ariane Martell, tanned from the southern sun, even the new king of the Isles, a younger Greyjoy with a reputation for caution rather than bloodlust. They found Jorah seated at the foot of the throne, the great chair draped in black and crimson. Behind him, Drogon lay on the steps, his massive head resting atop his talons, his eyes heavy-lidded but alert. Rhaegal and Vernah flanked the open windows, their bulk crowding the sunlight, the entire hall trembling with their presence. No lord? Not even Sansa or Tyrion met their gaze for long. Tyrion called the assembly to order. Missandei took the minutes, her script immaculate despite her trembling hands. Jorah stood as all eyes fell on him. You know why we are here. The queen is dead. She left no children, no named heir, but she left a realm united by peace, and a people who have tasted justice. That is her legacy. I will not see it squandered. Many. A chorus of murmurs, wary and curious, rippled through the hall. Some lords looked eager, others afraid. Edric Stark spoke first. The North is loyal to the memory of the Queen. We will not break the peace, but we will not kneel to any who would undo her work. Ariane Martell stepped forward. Dorne will not bow, but we will parley. Let us find a way to keep what she built without tearing it apart. Lady Tyrell's voice was sharp as broken glass. Westeros cannot be ruled by dragons and ghosts. We need a council, not a conqueror. Let every region choose its own leaders, and let those leaders rule together. Bah! Tyrion nodded. A council, not a throne. A new order. Some protested, old men who longed for crowns, young knights whose ambition was not yet dulled by grief. But the sight of Drogon on the steps, his tail twitching whenever voices rose, sobered them quickly. The memory of fire lingered, a warning from another age. At last, Jorah raised his voice, and it rang through the chamber, clear and unafraid. You have all seen what peace can bring. If you let ambition tear us apart, the world will return to ash. I will serve no king, no council, no queen who seeks the old power. But I will serve the realm, as she wished. Let there be peace between regions. Let the dragons fly not as threats, but as guardians. Them shall endure. He stepped back, letting silence speak. The lords conferred, quiet and intense, until Sansa rose, her hair a red banner in the torchlight. We cannot go back, she said. Nor can we pretend dragons do not exist. The world is changed. Let each region rule itself, but let there be a council for justice, a council for peace. Let the dragons watch, but never rule. It was done by sunset. For the first time in the realm's long, bloody history, the great houses agreed to a council of equals, each region with a voice, each sworn to defend the peace Daenerys had built. Jorah, by unanimous consent, was named Warden of the Dragons and Master of Justice. A title never before held, he accepted with humility. I will keep her promise. I will serve the people and the peace, no more, no less. The days of transition were difficult. Old wounds reopened, new threats stirred. But with the dragons as a living warning, no lord dared break faith. Jorah established his seat, not in the Red Keep, but in the open square beneath its shadow, where anyone, highborn or low, could bring petition or grievance. He walked among the people every morning, cloak plain, sword at his hip, but never drawn. Rhaegal and Vernah often flew above the city, their presence more comfort than terror. He traveled, across the Reach, where Lady Tyrell's stewards grumbled about the council, to Dorne, where Arianna's new laws for free trade brought merchants flocking to the Riverlands, where old Frey lands were given to those who had suffered in the wars. He listened more than he spoke, offering judgment only when justice demanded it. When lords quarreled, he brought them together and made them explain themselves not to him, but to the mothers and children who had lived through war. Years passed. The council changed faces, but not purpose. Tyrion grew frailer, his wit undimmed. Sansa sent her children to serve as wards and pages, each returning home with stories of dragons and peace. Even the Ironborn, given autonomy but forbidden to raid, sent grain and fish south in lean years. their young learning trade alongside swordplay. The dragons thrived, their numbers steady, their wildness gentle. Rhaegal lived long, growing massive and slow, content to sun himself in the meadows beyond the city. Verna took to flying far to the north, sometimes vanishing for weeks before returning, her scales dusted with snow, her eyes bright. Jorah aged with grace, his hair pure silver, his steps slow but sure. Children called him the Bear of the Peace, and their parents blessed him as he passed. He refused to take a keep or title greater than his office. His home remained the simple stone house beside the old gardens, where he kept Daenerys' memory alive with stories and small acts of mercy. Each year, on the anniversary of the Queen's death, the city held a feast in her honor. Bells rang. Songs filled the streets, and at sunset, Jorah would climb the steps to the place where Daenerys had first shown herself to the people. He would speak of her kindness, her courage, her dream of a world not ruled by fire or fear. And every time as the last words faded into dusk, the dragons would appear on the horizon, wheeling above the city, their wings casting long shadows over the walls. In the end, Jorah Mormont lived long enough to see the world remade. There were still quarrels, still hungry winters, still tempests and loss. But the great wheel had stopped turning for blood. In the hearts of the people, the memory of Daenerys, the merciful, and Jorah the Bear, the knight who healed a queen and became the guardian of peace, lived on. Children grew up believing dragons could protect as well as burn, and that men of honor could change the fate of kingdoms. When Jorah died, quietly one clear morning, beneath the willow head planted for Daenerys, the city gathered in silent mourning. The dragons circled above, their cries rising with the dawn. The council and the people alike wept for the old knight who had loved his queen and kept her dream alive. And as spring returned and the first flowers opened in the gardens, Westeros bloomed with the memory of an age shaped not by swords or crowns, but by a love that outlasted both. The sun rose gentle and golden on the day they laid Jorah Mormont to rest. All the bells in King's Landing tolled as they had for Daenerys, and from every alley and square, men and women, children and the aged alike, flocked to the palace gardens where the old knight would be buried. It was not a place of marble crypts or dark stone, but a living haven, bright with poppies and lavender, the willows dappling the sunlight, birds singing in the high branches. Jorah had chosen this place for himself years ago, planting the willow for Daenerys and sitting beneath its shade in the afternoons, telling stories to any who would listen. The council gathered in quiet procession. Tyrion Lannister, walking with a silver-tipped cane, led them, his hair gone white but his wit as dry as ever. Sansa Stark stood beside him, tall and grave, her hand steady on her son Edric's arm. Lady Tyrell arrived with garlands of roses, Princess Arianne Martell with orange blossoms and olive leaves, and the new Lord of Bear Island with a simple bundle of northern wildflowers. Missandei spoke soft prayers in the old tongue, and Grey Worm, armored still, carried Jorah's battered sword to be set at the knight's feet. All along the walls, the city's folk gathered in silence, their eyes bright with gratitude and loss. Children clung to their mothers. Old men bowed their heads. The healers whom Jorah had taught came in their plain gray robes, their hands ink-stained and trembling. When at last the bier was lifted, Rhaegal and Verna, oldest of the dragons, descended from the heights and landed at the edge of the garden, their great green and gold wings furled tight, their eyes solemn, and for a long aching moment, they bowed their heads as one. It was a sight that would never be forgotten by any who saw it, a promise that even the most ancient power in the world could honor a mortal life. Tyrion spoke first, his voice carrying far, clear and full of memory. Sir Jorah Mormont, the Bear of the Peace, the last and greatest of Daenerys' champions. He was not born to this city, nor did he ever seek power or reward. He came to us scarred, exiled, a man burdened by shame. Yet he became a bridge between fire and flesh, a healer of wounds both great and small. If the wheel of the world has ceased its grinding, if the peace endures, it is because Jorah carried it on his back, never faltering. Sansa stepped forward, laying a sprig of northern pine on the bier. He taught me that loyalty and love can outlast fear, that a true knight's honor is forged anew with every day he chooses to serve. My children will hear his story, and their children after them. There will never be another like him. Then, Edric Stark, now a grown man and Lord of Winterfell, knelt beside the grave, his head bowed. He was a father to me in all but blood. He taught me not just how to fight, but how to heal. He showed me that mercy is the greater strength. Others spoke, Missandei of his patience, Grey Worm of his courage, Lady Tyrell of his wisdom and counsel, Arianne of his laughter and his stubborn refusal to judge any soul by birth or blood. One by one they laid their tributes down, a scrap of parchment, a coin for luck, a child's painted stone, a feather from the city's swiftest falcon. Every gift told a piece of his story. Then, as the sun climbed higher and the air shimmered with heat, the people bowed their heads as Jorah's body was laid to rest beneath the willow. His sword and shield, battered and plain, were set above him, and Daenerys' ring placed in the crook of his arm. The dragons unfurled their wings, and with a cry that echoed across the city and far beyond, loosed a breath of shimmering flame, not in wrath, but in the gentlest tribute, the grass and wildflowers around the grave blooming brighter in the warmth. For 3 days, the city mourned. There were no decrees, no laws enforced, but no crime touched the streets. On the 4th day, the council reconvened. Tyrion presided, his eyes rimmed red but his voice steady. He would not wish us to pause. The world turns, and so must we. The new order held. The council, now called the Assembly of the Realm, was renewed by the lessons Jorah had lived. Sansa returned north, but every year she came back for the festival in his honor. Her own children now, as familiar with the palace as with the snows of Winterfell. Edric served as a peacemaker among the lords, earning a reputation for evenness and honesty that reminded many of the bear who had raised him. Rhaegal and Verna ranged far, their flights a living reassurance to the people. The dragons' numbers grew, but their wildness was gentle, never again turned on men. The old stories were rewritten. Dragons could burn, yes, but they could also heal, guard, and bless. Children came daily to the willow where Jorah lay, leaving gifts and prayers. The healers of the city, most of them trained in his gentle ways, swore their oaths beside his grave. Each year, as spring quickened, the people gathered for the Feast of the Bear, to share bread, song, and stories beneath the green boughs. But legends, even those rooted in peace, carry their shadows. In distant lands, word spread of Westeros' new way, of council, not crown, of dragons who served, not ruled, of a knight who forged peace from suffering. Some mocked, some plotted, some hoped to exploit the new order. But the people of Westeros, remembering war and fire and exile, remembered also Jorah's words, "We will hold true, or the wheel turns again." Years slipped quietly past. Edric Stark took a wife and returned to the north, his own son learning to walk beneath the willow, chasing shadows of dragons overhead. Missandei taught new generations of scribes. Lady Tyrell's gardens filled the city with flowers, and Arianne Martell's olive groves flourished in Dorne, now traded for Dornish wine in the taverns of King's Landing. It was said that on the eve of his own death, Tyrion Lannister walked once more through the palace gardens, cane in hand, and sat beneath the willow with a cup of arbor gold. "We did it, old bear," he said softly. "We made a peace worth the telling." He died that night, a smile on his lips. The world changed, as it always must. New threats rose, ambitious lords, proud merchants, storms from the sea, but the assembly endured. Its members spoke often of Daenerys and Jorah, holding their memory as a beacon and a check. For each dispute, there was the question, what would the bear have done? And every spring, when the willow burst into leaf and the dragons circled overhead, the children of the city came to listen for Jorah's story, how the exiled knight, cured by fire, won not a crown, but a peace that outlasted kings. In time, even the dragons faded into legend. Their descendants flew gentler, smaller. But the tales endured. The willow remained, wide and sheltering, its roots tangled deep around the old knight's bones. Flowers always bloomed there first. So it was that the story of Jorah Mormont outlasted his own life. Outlasted even the dragons. His name passed from parent to child, from teacher to student, in every corner of the realm. And where men gathered in peace to resolve their differences, to honor mercy over might, there it was, said the spirit of the bear lingered. Quiet, steadfast and kind, forever at the heart of the new world he helped to build.